Hey, good morning, everyone. So I wanted to hop on real quick this morning and go through this morning's price action on the SP500. So as you can see here, I had a 4-minute fair value gap marked out that I kind of missed that initial wick entry. Price did come back down and test it again. And as you can see, it's pushing pretty deep into it. And this does end up getting stopped out. This was definitely a case of FOMO here. I entered ahead of the 9:45 and 10 a.m. news releases, which was another kind of mistake against my rules. So yeah, ended up getting stopped out on that one, as you can see right there. So moving on from there, I was definitely trying to stick to price running towards the London high or higher. Was kind of my bias. I was looking for buys there. And then as you can see, here, just kind of zooming out, showing the 15-minute perspective, you can see where London took the sell side liquidity and the buy side liquidity, setting the London low and London high. So we're trading inside of that range. We've got down to equilibrium of the London range, so I was looking for buys below that up to the London high or above, because I am expecting for the week price to trade back up to the weekly gap. And I marked out a 15-minute fair value gap there, so you can kind of see price was resting at this area of support in a discount inside of the London range. And you can see my original buy limit I had set there that I was kind of waiting for price to come down and hit. And, funny story, it did come down and hit it later, around 11 o'clock. It finally came down and tapped that area. But you can see, so now we're down on the 3-minute, kind of see that blue line there is kind of where we took out another low. So we dropped below a low, and now I'm looking for it to take out that high, which would be above the daily and the 8:30 open, which are those two orange lines there. So I should be putting that line on here in just a second. So basically at this point, I'm thinking okay, I want to see price run above that high, which it does right there. So I'm like, okay, still bullish. We took a low, we took a high. I draw fib to determine where equilibrium is. Identify a fair value gap in a discount right there right away. So now it's just kind of, and we're still, it's worth noting here, we're still ahead of the 10 a.m. news release. So I'm trying to exercise some caution here about jumping in again ahead of a news release. So so basically just kind of watching, trying to determine, where a good spot would be, because obviously we want something below equilibrium, but also realizing that based on the 15-minute, price is already kind of at an area of support, and so basically just waiting for it to retrace back down into this little displacement leg higher that it made. So, and again, this was kind of marking a 5-minute fair value gap that kind of appeared, but, and I'm noting this here, that fair value gap is actually not in a discount. It's actually above the equilibrium mark of that displacement. So I was kind of confused at this point on where I should be entering, because obviously I wanted to enter down where you still see the limit set at 41.2775. I was testing some buy, limits on some of these fair value gaps on the lower time frames, and all of them had a wider stop loss than I really wanted to set. Because if I'm entering on the, 1, 2, 3-minute time frames, I don't want, a super huge stop loss, because the point of narrowing an entry down that low, is to kind of get that tight stop and get it, dialed in as close as you can. if I'm entering on the 5 minute, sure, but like, so this is was kind of showing me that I had a bit of a, this wasn't an A quality setup for me. I was still sure of my bias for this first half of the New York session. Like I said, it was going to hit the London high. I just, that's what I was expecting. I was just trying to get long in a profitable enough spot that I could hit 3R by the time that happens. So now here we see price has, broken that swing high, and it's, started to retrace down. If you had looked at this on like a 30-second time frame, you would see another kind of change of, market structure break, because price is fractal. So, everything is repeating on lower time frames. So here you can see I'm setting another limit, and, a 3R trade puts me well above the London high, which I didn't really like that, and I even, moved the trade up to kind of get into my 50% of the fair value gap I was using on the 1 minute time frame, and I noted here that price tapped the equilibrium of this displacement leg and rejected, hard from that. And I don't think I marked this on the chart, but if you look right around that equilibrium level, there's a fair value gap right there. And I'm actually putting a line right there. There's a little fair value gap right there that the low point of it does go below the equilibrium level. And, it ultimately turns out that that's where, the entry would have been, and I just would have had to deal with a slightly wider stop loss. Because you'll see right there, it taps that line, and I'm still sticking to my 1 minute fair value gap there. Put in my actual trade to match the long position. That's just the chart annotation. So I did actually put in an execution there. And there you see I marked that fair value gap. That's right, kind of straddling the equilibrium. That's ultimately as low as it goes for that move. It never did get that final little tap down into the 1 minute fair value gap that I was looking for, which is unfortunate because, as you'll see here in the coming minutes of this video, you'll see it does, this is the start of the move running up to where it pushes through the London high, and would have essentially completed my trade idea. And there are other options. I could have put a stop loss at the start of the fair value gap, the first candle of the fair value gap. I could have put it at the low that got broken by those candles around like 9:45. I could have put it at the low that those broke. So there were other options I could have explored, but again, that's where it starts bending rules and stuff. So here you say, I was like, okay, that high was broken. So that kind of invalidated my trade idea at that point, because it broke another swing high. So at that point, I'm kind of waiting for more information. And as you see here, this is where I was kind of putting out that, like, look, this is the fair value gap that would have been the ideal entry, but it had a larger stop loss than I wanted. And there you see now it's breaking through the London high, which would have been my trade idea for the morning. And as you see here, I'm clearing out the limit that price actually came back and tapped into around 11. But even though it did, it's still a little suspect as to whether price is going to continue higher today or if we're going to get another bearish push down. So with news being at 10, I could see an entry being, past, closer to 11 and stuff like that. That's still okay. But yeah, so essentially I got into early, got stopped out with the news. And then was waiting for a lower fair value gap that just never came to fruition. And then, yeah, once it broke the London high, that kind of collapsed my trade idea for this morning. So I'll be back on the charts this afternoon to see what it does for the PM session.